Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Taking the Dis Out of Disability. Last time that we met, just last week, we discussed what's in a name. And we discussed the viability and the challenges of using the word disability in describing persons with challenged abilities. We talked about the definition of the word. We broke it down from dis and all of that, meaning naturally any word that's prefaced by a dis, we said was a word that implied not like the word. In other words, it was the opposite of the original word. So you get disrespect means not respected. You get dishonor, meaning not honored. All this changes the meaning of the word, makes it the opposite of the meaning of the word. So disability would mean not able. Not able. And I think for too long people have viewed us as being not able. People have stressed the dis in disability and have really ignored the ability in disability. And so we talk about, I was on a program last night in a room in Clubhouse that dealt with issues of persons with challenged abilities. And they were talking about inspirational porn, which means that, anything we do should be so admired, so inspiring. Crossing the street by yourself. Oh my, I didn't realize he could do that. Sitting in a classroom maybe and eventually matriculating to the point of getting a bachelor's degree or even high school degree, diploma for that matter, is an achievement worth in admiring to the extreme. I don't mean certainly someone who has taken an obstacle and risen above that obstacle should be admired, should be respected. It's that act in itself, not the person so much, but the action should be the thing worth noting. Not so much that he or she who's in a wheelchair or who's deaf or who's blind or who has other physical, developmental, or mental challenges have accomplished something. So I didn't realize they could do that. I didn't realize that the person with a quote unquote disability was able to do even the bare routine, simplest of tasks. And so even the simplest of tasks is almost taken as though we didn't know you could even do that much. So today we're going to be dealing with it on a deeper level. We're going to be dealing with the topic ableism and racism, the double threat of African Americans with challenged abilities. Ableism and racism. We know the scourge of racism. We're living it now in this nation as we speak. White supremacy is running rampant in many minds, many hearts, and many actions that we've seen of really way beyond the 4 years of Donald Trump. We've always seen it. Since the days of slavery, we have seen how racism has been a scourge in the lives of persons of the African American community. We had slavery, then we had Reconstruction, then we had Jim Crow. And even now, unarmed black folk are being killed and are being murdered by law enforcement as well as others. So this prejudice, this bias, this injustice that has always hovered over our lives, hovered over our heads, still exists. But just as much of a scourge as racism is, so is ableism. The idea that if someone cannot be viewed as being a first-class citizen just because they're in a wheelchair, just because they have a seeing eye dog and are visually and have a challenge visually or audio challenge, they can't hear, a developmental challenge like autism and other things of that nature, which is somewhat of a developmental mental condition. But just because you are and you have these conditions, you're born either black, white, Native American, Asian, Latin American. Of course, that's not a race. That's really a ethnic group. Nevertheless, we have to understand that these differences still are prevalent in this country today. And so I'm going to take this time, and it's going to be a series. It's not going to be a one-sitting presentation today. I'm going to do it over a period of time, because there's many layers to this. And not just this, but other obstacles that stand in the way of persons with challenged abilities becoming full-fledged citizens of this nation and the world. Today we're going to start our I said two-part, but I believe it's going to be more than that, but two-sectioned, because we're going to deal with racism and ableism, or ableism and racism. Today we're going to deal with ableism. We're going to do it in a specific way. I want to deal with black ableism. Excuse me, let me get just a little drink of water. Okay. In a very specific way, we're going to be looking at it in terms of black ableism. Now, black ableism can be defined as discrimination, prejudice, and bigotry against black people with challenged abilities by non-disabled. Even some of our prominent black activists, like 80-plus-year-old civil rights advocate and economy expert, Dr. Claude Anderson, who has over the years actively and effectively championed the cause of black liberation, black awareness, equality, and justice, was on the program, The Breakfast Club, not too long ago. Good afternoon to Bishop Davis. And while he was on there, he was talking about his career in the civil rights movement, as being a part of the commission, Civil Rights Commission of Florida. And he proposed a plan that was specifically designed to improve the lives of African Americans. Bravo, doctor. And I was very uplifted by that, because I am an African American as well. He outlined before the post that were there some wonderful ideas and suggestions on how we can get reparations, how we can narrow the wealth gap between the majority group and our community. He talked about all of that. Then he added this that disturbed me as he was talking about the great ideas and achievements that he wants to strive to attain. He said he made it clear that his proposal was drawn up to improve the lives of black folks. Thank you, dear. She's advertising my Satan He's More Than an Ocean book, and I think I do have it here, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But as Dr. Anderson was describing his great vision, if you will, of improving the lives of all African Americans, or African Americans, I'll say like that at this point. He made a point to say also that his plan, his agenda, his program, if you will, does not include the handicapped, midgets, and hunchbacks. That's what Claude Anderson said. Now, we know many within the black community look up to him, and in terms of his work in the black community, he has certainly been a giant amongst men. But you can't just say you support actions that will improve the lives of black Americans when you specifically say that does not include the hunchbacks, the midgets, and the handicapped. That almost covers everybody. Everybody's in one of those categories that have a special challenge. So you see, we have to understand that by making this latter statement, the good doctor either consciously or unconsciously is marginalizing, at least or at worst, omitting 20% of the black community. Approximately 8,800,000 African Americans with challenged abilities. How can you say, as a minority group yourself, as a minority representative yourself, how can you say that I'm fighting for the cause of justice and equality for African Americans, but you omit 20% of those who are African American, and may I say the most disenfranchised, marginalized of African Americans? Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson, over 20 years ago, said this: the most disenfranchised of the disenfranchised in our society are minorities, black folks with disabilities. Think about it. How can one claim the rights and liberties of African Americans, yet at the same time be willing to abandon nearly a fourth of its population to poverty and mediocrity? Sounds contradictory and hypocritical to me. I myself have experienced ableism within the black community. As a young boy and a teenager, I experienced it primarily in the predominantly black schools that I went to, by both students and teachers alike, and even among my peers in the neighborhoods that I lived. As an adult, I experienced ableism within one of the largest African American church denominations, and I was an ordained elder and pastor in it. Their promotions were denied me because, according to the church leadership, I did not fit the image of a first-class pastor. I was also confronted by ableism on jobs that were owned and operated by black folks, both male and female, which in time, even though I was a good and faithful employee who added to the productivity of the business, they always found a way to dismiss me. Some of these businesses I was in 5, 6, 7 years. I know I was a school teacher at one time, taught history for 5 or 6 years. There was a new administration that came in that said that no longer could anyone help me get to the site of where the classroom was. But I used to have to, in the wintertime when snow and ice, I found that I was able to walk, but I've always walked. Those who know me know I was born with cerebral palsy, and I've always had a significant limp and also a use of only one of my hands effectively, I would say. The other hand's more of a helper hand. So I always needed someone to help me in the ice and the snow. And so during the winter months of the school year, the previous administration would allow some of the students to come down to the house. I just lived up the block. It wasn't like I lived across town. I lived right up the street from the school. So they came down there. Many of them would even have to shovel the driveway, would shovel the steps, not the driveway, but the steps, the pavement, and all the rest for me to get to the school. But they would always come down, help me, one on each side, and sometimes one in the back in case I would fall, there would still be someone there. But the administration changed, and that was no longer their policy. I had to get there the best way I could, they said, so there's none of their business how I got there. These types of examples, and I can give you so many more, but that would be too lengthy for me to do. It would become the situation itself. Good afternoon, Lauren. So we've seen black ableism. I've experienced black ableism. The idea that black folk would show discrimination against other black folk who had physical, developmental, and mental challenges. Let me continue with the further evidence as to how ableism continues to be in the very psyche of our society. One thing that I find very interesting is that some of the highest profile cases of police brutality and murder occur in the lives of black folk with challenged abilities. You won't know that by listening to the news. You won't know that many times by even listening to the commentary within our own community that these persons actually were not only black and many times male, though we have some female examples as well, of persons that were brutalized, and one in particular that was killed because we did not know that she had some condition. But for example, Laquan McDonald, a young man, a fact that was highly emphasized, young black man, everybody knew that. They made sure you knew that. Also had a mental condition called PSTD, a fact omitted by most news outlets. So yeah, he was a black young man, but he also had a mental challenge. Another example can be found in the case of Eric Gardner, who was in New York, who died from asphyxiation at the hands of the Staten Island police. We all know that he was a black man who was choked out in public. Yes, cell phones and cameras were recording it all. But most of us did not know that he had some pre-existing conditions. He was obese. He was also, he had asthma. And he also had a heart condition, all contributing to his condition. That's why when he said, "I cannot breathe," he literally meant he could not breathe. But once again, law enforcement is not trained to deal with people who have physical, developmental, or mental challenges. The press does not emphasize that because that's not newsworthy. You're not newsworthy. That's not going to sell the papers. That's not going to sell the ads. That's not going to sell the news spots on the internet or the TV. What sells is that he was a black man. She was a black woman. Let me go with that black woman. And let's not forget Sandra Bland, a young black woman who was arrested for a minor traffic violation in Texas. You know the story. She was in a situation that should not even have escalated the way it did. They found her dead they arrested the young lady, and they found her dead in her cell, hanging there. What wasn't widely reported is that she was an epileptic, diagnosed with manic depression. Then in 2020, there was a shooting and murder of Walter Wallace Jr. by Philadelphia police officers. Wallace was a man diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and manic depression. While having one of his episodes, family called for assistance of medical professionals. They wanted somebody who could deal with him to come and help him. The problem is, in many instances, the police are also involved, so they arrived first. And instead of waiting for the medical professionals that could have dealt with this man who was having an episode, they decided to take, quote unquote, the law into their own hands and provoke the young man. He came outside wielding a knife, and they shot him and killed him. Right here in the city of, quote unquote, brotherly love. In these cases and others like them, rarely are mentioned or even considered the fact that these persons have challenged abilities. It seems like a person's physical, emotional, or mental condition is rarely taken into consideration when dealing with potentially explosive and tragic situations. The mistreatment of persons of African descent with challenged abilities, I prefer to use this term instead of the more commonly used disability, and I described last week why I prefer physically challenged versus disability, because as we defined last time that we met, because of the ableistic meaning of the word. Disability means something, or in the case of human beings, someone who is limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything. In my opinion, in my experience, this definition does not define most of the 60+ million Americans with challenged abilities. But this is the image that we have. That's why when we do the least significant things, cross the street, tie your own shoelaces, talk, it's inspirational. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. Oh, you speak so well. I mean, I assume that you didn't have a voice like that. Looking at you in the wheelchair, I didn't think you had a voice like that. Looking the way you walk and how you hold your hand, and sometimes even have a stuttering problem. I didn't know you could actually speak so eloquently. I could never imagine that. I've been to restaurants and instead of asking me what I want to eat or what I want to drink, they'll ask my wife, my aide, or whoever I'm with, what does he want to eat? What does he want to drink? Like I can't talk. Like my mind cannot think about that. I mean, someone has to choose it for me. And I've had to confront them. You know how I am. Those who know me, I did confront it. One person asked my wife, what does he want to eat? We went to a restaurant. What does he want to eat? Does he want to eat steak or chicken? That's on the menu. I said, excuse me, miss. I said, I think I can choose what I want to eat. I did graduate from Temple University, and I don't think it's too difficult for me to decide whether I want to eat chicken or steak for dinner. So many examples. You know, I've lived this thing for almost 70 years now. I was born this way back in 1951. So I've experienced over these many years the biases, not just racial, but also ableistic biases. And that's what we're talking about right now, ableism within, and that was a young black woman that dealt with me on that level. Within the black community specifically, ableism is across the board. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that other folks aren't ableistic as well. We know that. We know that. Jobs, opportunities, other things, housing, how short, we don't have much housing availability, curbs that aren't cut. All those are decided not by the black community, they're decided by the dominant community. Certain lack of accessibility, certain limitations that I have to experience in my life, those decisions are made by the dominant society. They're made by the white folks. So I'm not saying that, that the only people that are ableistic are my own people. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. But what I'm trying to say is people that are marginalized themselves, that society has put their foot on the neck themselves, should be the last one, good afternoon, Shirley, should be the last one to stand as an opposition. I always believe this, and I really do believe this, and I hope I'm wrong, but I believe we're always looking for somebody that we can put in the bottom of ourselves. There has to be a bottom feeder to make me feel worthy, to make me feel like somebody. And so even those who have been at the bottom try to find somebody who's at the bottom lower than themselves. And even if it means looking at their own community. So I'm not talking about, there's ableism toward other people. I'm talking about black folks that are ableistic toward black folks. And we have to understand that. Disability is a phrase used to minimize and even devalue who we are and our worth in this society. It is. The mistreatment of persons of African descent with challenged abilities in this country is nothing new. In the days of slavery here in the United States, plantation journals indicate that a slave with physical, sensory challenges were expected to work as long and as hard as his or her able-bodied counterparts. Many slaves that became too challenged or too old or too feeble to be of financial worth to his or her master would be removed from the community and sent out into the woods to fend for themselves, leading to their eventual death. Frederick Douglass's grandmother is a prime example. For when she became too old and too weak to be of any monetary value to her master. She ended up being sent away to either starve to death or to be killed by wild animals. This uncaring and inhumane treatment was meant to show the other slaves that unproductive black folk were expendable, to be abandoned and to be thrown away like garbage, thus creating fear and misgivings about the possibility of becoming physically or mentally challenged themselves, translated into adopting an attitude among many healthy slaves towards slaves with challenged abilities as their being worthless and needing to be shunned or hidden away. Hence the birth of black ableism. I believe many times that we can't really associate with and really become familiar and draw near to persons with challenged abilities because somehow or another in the recesses of our mind, we see ourselves maybe once becoming what they are. Because it only takes a fall down the steps or an accident in your car or maybe a disease that happens that you have no inclination you are even prone to have. A genetic situation that you live 20 years and all of a sudden now you find yourself with MS. You live 30 years and now you've been in a car accident and now you're paraplegic. You've been in a war, you've been in some kind of skirmish, and you find yourself blinded from a flash of some kind of firearm or whatever. Something happens where you become deaf. You have meningitis and you become deaf. All kinds of things that can happen to you along life's journey at any age. And sometimes just to look at someone in a wheelchair, just to look at someone and have to deal with someone who's blind, you'd rather not. Because the implication is, say for the grace of God go I. Another factor that has advanced and perpetuated black ableism within the black community is rooted in religion. Yes, Bishop is saying it's rooted in religion. A man who served as a pastor for over 20 years, I'm saying much of this ableistic view has been birthed through religion. In quite a few African religions, it is taught and believed that people with challenged abilities, whether physical, developmental, or mental, are in said condition because of some bad deed done by them, or they're being cursed, or some kind of witchcraft is going on. Something evil. Something evil that they did, or their parents did, or somebody did that contributed to their being what they are. I know in Hinduism, they believe that if you lived a raggedy first life in your reincarnation, you may end up being physically challenged because of some sin, some deed that you did that was contrary to the gods. And so now that your next reincarnated life, you find yourself with some kind of physical, developmental, or mental condition. Judeo-Christianity, which is the religious tradition of most African Americans, especially the segment that identify themselves as being evangelical or prosperity ministry folk, hold to the belief that sin and the lack of faith in God is the root cause of a person becoming and remaining a person with a challenged ability. After all, even the Hebrew word for sin, which is avon, is depicted as being perverted, bent, and twisted, which brings an stereotypical image of a person with a challenged ability. Bent, perverted, and twisted. The word itself means that. The Old Testament teaches that those with disabilities are blemished, stained, and defective. People that needed to be fixed in order to be accepted within society. This belief trickled down to the days of Yeshua, Jesus himself, which adhered to the idea that a person with a challenged ability from birth was a result of a sin either committed by himself or his or her parents. Good afternoon to my cousin Gregory. Or the child himself. The latter being interesting because Judaism and Christianity does not embrace reincarnation. So when did the newborn baby that was born blind, the newborn baby that had cerebral palsy, the newborn baby that was born deaf, when did they sin? We don't believe in reincarnation. We don't believe, not the Judeo-Christian does not believe in reincarnation, that they had a life before this life. So when did they sin? That's a curious idea. Either the parent sinned or the child. I don't understand that. You know, that's something someone would have to explain to me. But that's what they believe, okay? A lot of beliefs that are adhered to have no grounds for logic at all. All of these misguided beliefs have nevertheless helped to give birth to black ableism. Yet these age-old, antiquated beliefs cannot stand up to the reality that some of our most noteworthy and in many cases most heroic members of our community were and are persons with challenged abilities. This is Black History Month. And as you remember Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and Benjamin Banneker and all these others, I want to present some others that we need to remember on Black History Month. The first is someone we all know, we all learned in school or learning through books or whatever. Her name is, and she's certainly in the news now, Harriet Tubman. Born in 1822 and died in 1913. Tubman, best known as Black Moses, was an abolitionist known for her work on the Underground Railroad, a remarkable channel of stations from the south to the north that helped runaway slaves to flee to safer ground. Harriet Tubman herself is credited with leading at least 300 slaves to freedom. She was something, I tell you. Her story is something to be envied. She ended up being during the Civil War, she ended up being a spy and a counter agent and all of that, a scout. And while she was doing that, she was taking black folk out into a place of freedom. So she had to go down south to scout the Southern Confederate Army and all of that type of thing, feigning to be a slave, and she would get into this and all of that, find out some information that she could give to the Union Army. And so while she was doing that, she had not forget her call, which was to help free and liberate fellow slaves. So she took them out along with her. When she went back north, she took many slaves with her then. Less well known, however, is that Miss Tubman suffered from epilepsy and narcolepsy as a result of a severe head injury she sustained when she was beaten by her master at 12. In fact, she wasn't even beaten by the master. What actually happened was that one of these overseers was trying to throw a metal object at another slave. He ducked, and the metal object hit Harriet in the head. That caused her to have seizures and a sleep condition. Seizures that led because of her having epilepsy, developing epilepsy, and then her sleep disorder because she also had narcolepsy. All of these conditions. But in spite of all that, keep in mind, she was 12 years old. This is way before she became Black Moses. This is well before she liberated so many other. She liberated herself first and then came back and brought others up. Well before that, she was nothing but a kid. Wasn't even a teenager yet. But she had committed her life to doing this wonderful thing for herself and for her people. Harriet Tubman. There's a black historical moment that we don't hear about often. We hear about her great work in helping free slaves, but we don't to me, it helps me appreciate her more to know that she had a struggle. She had her own personal struggle. It looked like once she got free, after the things she's been through, suffering with epilepsy and narcolepsy, she got it up north, went to Philadelphia, that's where she ended up being, and she goes back down south to help liberate, put her own life in danger, helping to liberate others. It just adds another dimension when we understand the physical challenge that she had to live with every day of her life from the time she was 12 years old until the time she died in 1913. Another black hero, I call him, certainly a black individual who's worth noting. He was called Blind Tom Wiggins. Blind Tom lived from 1849 to 1908. He was born blind, and as an infant, Tom was sold into slavery, along with the rest of his family. He also survived being killed. Remember, I told you before, when someone has a physical challenge and they cannot be of service to the master, many a time that individual was killed, sent away, or whatever. So they sought to kill him. But he had no economic value to the master. However, Tom had access to a piano, and his talents for perceiving, remembering, and reproducing sounds was immediately apparent. Many historians also believe that Tom was on the autism spectrum, which could explain his extraordinary memory. He would go on to perform at concerts throughout the Americas and even Europe. And his extraordinary music has inspired lovers of music worldwide, including Elton John, who composed a song in his honor. Was a world-renowned pianist, musician, and composer. On the spectrum of having autism, and the word wasn't even known at that time. And he was definitely someone who was blind. Should have been killed, should have been destroyed, but somehow or another, because of his gift, because of his ability, not his disability, but because of his ability, his life was spared, and he became one of the most world-renowned pianists of his time, black or white. Next we have Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer lived from 1917 to 1977. Ms. Hamer was a civil rights activist who was important in efforts to help African Americans register to vote. Fannie Lou Hamer was a civil rights leader who helped African Americans register to vote and co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party in 1964. She was a champion of the cause of equality and justice against systemic racism. Hamer had polio as a child, and then as an adult was beaten so severely during one of her marches for freedom in Mississippi, it caused her to have a permanent limp and a permanent kidney ailment. Johnny Lacey was born in 1937, died in 1910, is another person who has left an indelible imprint in the fight for racial and disability justice for African Americans. Growing up in the Jim Crow South, Miss Lacey was actually aware of the too numerous acts of discrimination against her and her fellow Americans. At age 19, Lacey was diagnosed with polio and eventually needed a wheelchair to get around. From then on, she also became a disability advocate and self-advocate in the struggle to be able to attend a university. A right not guaranteed at the time, certainly not for persons who were black or who had a physical challenge. And for the resources to live independently in the community as a black woman with a challenged ability. We can go on and on and on. Harry Belafonte, Caban Gurman. We could go on. Halle Berry, Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, Solange Knowles. We could go on and on with people, John Tucker, with people who had challenges but rose above their station, realized that they had a purpose, and that purpose superseded whatever they couldn't do, and they realized what they could do, and they accomplished great things. That's what can happen if you give someone the opportunity. to highlight their ability and take away the dis in their ability. We as a people should and must include the fourth of us who are physically, developmentally, or mentally challenged in our struggle. You can't say Black Lives Matter when you exclude 20% of Black lives in the struggle. You can't say Black Lives Matter and you don't bring along all Black lives. You can't say Black Lives Matter and you still shun and ignore and minimize and marginalize 20% of your own group. You can't say that Black Lives Matter. You can't talk about Black history and forget Harriet Tubman. You can't talk about Black history and forget Fannie Lou Hamer. You can't talk about Black history and omit some of the greatest heroes of our community. You can't do it and not do it with any good conscience. We have a wonderful treasure in all of us. And we need to appreciate that treasure in each of us. And to try to promote, encourage, support Mr. Dr. Claude Anderson. It's wonderful to talk about championing the cause of Black liberation. It's wonderful to talk about the cause of bringing equality and justice to the Black community. But you can't really say that you're championing the cause of Black America when a fourth of your people you consider not even worthy to consider. The next time that we meet, we will address the second half of our discussion when we delve into the issue of racism experienced by African Americans with challenged abilities from whites with challenged abilities. So we have ableism on one hand, Black ableism from prejudices and biases from Black able-bodied Black Americans towards persons with challenged abilities who are also Black Americans. And we also have racism from white disabled folk or persons with challenged abilities against blacks and other minorities with challenged abilities. But next time we're going to meet, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, once again, ableism and racism, the double threat to African Americans with challenged abilities. We looked at Black ableism today. Next time we meet, taking the dis out of disability, we will deal with the racism that exists within the disability community. We'll never be what God has purposed us to be as long as we have the stumbling blocks. And our stumbling blocks, ironically, is not our physical challenge. It's not even our race. It's the attitudes of people that we have to deal with who think themselves superior because of the state they find themselves in. Blacks who are able-bodied feel that they are on a higher level than blacks who have physical, developmental, and mental challenges. Whites who have disabilities think they're on a higher level because they are white. And they stand on their white privilege. And in spite of the fact that we both can't see and we both are in a wheelchair or we both are deaf or we both have some physical, developmental, or mental challenge that hinder us, we still see ourselves, those who are black, as they see us as being still inferior to them. Jobs are denied them as it is us. Understand that. So until next time that we meet, we're going to meet again on next Thursday on this topic. I may do it a little earlier. I may do it on Monday. But just check out my page, Gerald Scott, and we will go from there. Just check out my page, Gerald Scott, on Facebook, and you will see the next time that we have our program. Thank you, my dear. I love you too. And we want every one of you to be blessed. Remember, on every Wednesday we have Real Talk with the G-Man. every Wednesday. We'll talk with the G-Man at 6 p.m. on Blog Talk Radio. The call-in number is 515-602-9655. That is 515-602-9655. Every Wednesday, Real Talk with the G-Man, prime time, every Wednesday. And we also have a program called The Truth in God's Word. That's every Sunday and or Monday. Check out on my page. You'll see all the times that all of the programs will be available for perusal. Once again, just like this program, that program's on Facebook Live. So continue to support us, continue to share this information. I think it's so vitally important. We need to educate ourselves. Thank you, my dear. My wife is posting in the comment section the call-in number for Real Talk with the G-Man Prime Time every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Blog Talk Radio. We always talk about the latest, sometimes and many times the most controversial issues that face our nation today and our people today. So we encourage you to tune in to Real Talk with the G-Man. We've had Judge Brown. We've had other dignitaries that have been on that on our program. Education is the key. We need to learn about so much that we find ourselves not knowing enough about. And so if you want to learn, that's what my influx is. I've always been a preacher, a teacher, and a motivational speaker. So all of that's dealing with education. All of that's dealing with learning truths, seeing things the way they really are, and not the way people have presented them to be. And so every day that we talk, we try to make it real talk, whether we're talking about the politics, whether we're talking about racial discrimination and all of that, whether we're talking about discrimination because of disability or challenged abilities, which I prefer. And that's a phrase that I've kind of picked up from my wife. She coined it, but I had a problem with the word disability. So I said, I don't know what we're going to call, what would I want to call us? What do I see myself as being? And so she said she has lupus, so she has certainly considered it. She said that I think they're physically challenged or developmentally challenged. People with challenged abilities, that's what she came up with. People with challenged abilities, so you have a physical challenge, you have a developmental challenge or a mental challenge, whatever, it's a person with a challenged ability. In 2021, my wife says, there's no reason that we cannot learn. There's no reason we cannot learn. We've been handed so much guff. We've been bamboozled, defrauded of learning, denied the opportunity to learn, been given a whole lot of lies in so many areas. Things that we perceive, things that we believe have no base in reality. And so the veil has to be lifted. The veil has to be lifted. And the truth has to be seen, and you have to be able to tell it so people can understand it. And here we are, dealing with it. My wife also has a program, and go to her program. She has a program on YouTube. It's called, Lady T's Things That Bling, DIY. Go to her program. It's right on YouTube. It's entitled that, Lady T's Things That Bling. You go to there, you'll see all of her crafts, all of her arts and crafts. And every once in a while, she'll give you a little philosophical nugget of spiritual insight that will encourage you, that will give you insight and inspiration. She's almost at 1,000. I think she's a few persons away from 1,000 followers there on her YouTube channel. So subscribe to her YouTube channel, Lady T's Things That Bling, DIY, and just do it yourself, and you will be blessed. I tell you, I've learned a lot. Talking about education, I've learned a lot by doing that. Some don't want to learn because they're afraid of the unknown. They are comfortable in what they already have learned. But what we've already learned has gotten us how far? We're more divided now in this nation. There's more chaos and confusion in this nation. This nation, if you don't watch it, it's about ready to go under. We may march to it. We talk about socialism. We have to be careful because we may end up being under the communist rule. Maybe not directly, but indirectly. When all your economics and your monies are received by people and they have the power over you, you'd be surprised. She says, I need at least 2 people. I want to get 5 people to join Lady T's Things That Bling DIY videos on YouTube. At least 5 of you. Right now, go. As we leave, we're going to end our program. Go right now to Lady T's Things That Bling DIY, which is doing it yourself. Doing it yourself. She's going to teach you how to do a lot of stuff yourself. You're going to be surprised how talented you can be by how talented she is. Go to her page right now and subscribe to her channel, Lady T's Things That Bling DIY. Hit the notification bell, and every time she comes on, you will be the first one to know when she's coming on, and you can flip your cell phone, channel, laptop, even TV, because many TVs now can get YouTube as well. Flip it right to the channel, and you can learn so much more, and share it with others. We have a lot of situations coming up right now. Easter is not Resurrection Day. Easter is on its way. We already had on Wednesday rather. Ash Wednesday was this past Wednesday, just yesterday. So we're already into the Lent season. We're getting ready to get into the Easter and Resurrection Day holiday. You know, how we like little crafts. And well, she's about ready to do those crafts now. She has trays and other things that are available. Mugs, shirts, hats. So many things she has available. Stop by Lady T's Things That Bling DIY. And you can also go to her website, LadyT'sThingsThatBling.com. And you can see all of the items, the prices, and the like. And feel free to purchase one of these reasonably priced, beautifully crafted items that she has made. Good afternoon, Billy. God bless you all, and see you next time. Tomorrow we'll probably be getting on again. I don't know which of these 3 groups, whether I'll be dealing with Real Talk, whether I'll be dealing with the disability issue, or whether I'll be dealing with the spiritual one. But we will be coming on for a little bit on tomorrow as well. So God bless you, and be careful, safe, and for God's sake, show love to somebody who needs to know that love still lives even today. Talk to you soon. Bye.